Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome to another vlogmas video. Today I want to tell you about the 24 books I'm planning / hoping to read in 2024. I did make a 23 in 2023 list, but at the beginning of 2023 I was relying exclusively on my TBR jar to pick whatever I was reading, so I didn't actually have a whole lot of control over what I was reading. Granted, I could have just picked the books I was reading. I could have just picked the books from my list, but then I knew that I would have titles in the TBR jar that I had already read, which isn't a massive issue, but it was the thing in my brain, so I didn't really do it. So a lot of my 23 in 2023 I didn't get around to reading, but on principle I haven't included them in my 24 in 2024 because it feels like cheating. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it makes sense in my brain, so I'm going with it. So I had a look through my unread TBR and picked out a bunch of titles that really called to me, that I really wanted to read, and then for the last 4 books I think I just used my TBR jar to pick randomly, and I made a TikTok out of that, so I'll leave a link to that in the description if you're interested in watching that. But today I'm going to go through the 24 books I'm hoping and planning to read in 2024. They're not ranked in order of priority, they're literally listed in order of alphabetical by author surname. And at the end of the video I'll tell you about my plan to actually get through these and why it might not work. Oh, I should really get the physical book, shouldn't I? There's a real variety on this list. There's some contemporary romance because that is my go-to genre apparently. There's quite a bit of fantasy, there's some non-fiction, there's authors I've read before, there's authors I haven't read before. Actually mostly authors I haven't read before, but there's a real mix. So let's just jump right in. So the first book I picked was The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This is one of those that's in the 3 for £6 at the works. It's a stereotypical contemporary romance, but it's a sports romance and the female character appears to be a ballerina, or according to the blurb she used to be a ballerina, and I grew up being a dancer girl, so any stories that involve dance in any way, shape or form, I'm like, hello, I'm there. The back literally says, discover the friends to lovers romance that became a sensation on TikTok. And generally the books that I've seen recommended and hyped on TikTok are ones that I enjoy, so I think this will be a kind of relatively easy, nice, easy cheesy romance. Book number 2 is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I've seen so much hype over the Dreamland Billionaires series, and they're all relatively cheap at the works. I got this one for £6. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, there it is. But I refuse to let myself buy the others until I've actually read this one, because I've made that mistake with so many books where I'm like, yeah, I must collect the whole series, and then I didn't even like the first one. Twisted Love is the one that comes to mind. I bought Twisted Love and Twisted Games, hated Twisted Love, and I was like, no, I am not giving any more time or money to this series. So I've learned from that mistake. I've only bought the first one, and if and when I read this I'm allowed to buy the other ones. But again, this just seems like another stereotypical contemporary romance, but with rich people, which is also something I enjoy reading about. From what I understand, it's 3 sons who are set to inherit elements of not Disneyland-esque theme park, and they've all got conditions they have to meet, and they all fall in love along the way. Because of course they do, it's a romance book. Then we have something completely different. It's Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. I absolutely love this cover. I prefer this cover to the American cover. I don't really like the artwork on the American cover, but the tagline on this literally says high fantasy, low stakes, good company, and to me this sounds like my favourite parts of a D&D campaign, which is the bits where you're in a tavern just chatting shit and being funny, and apparently this is what this is like. I've heard so much hype over these books. I know there's a prequel called Bookshops and Bone Dust, which again I'm not letting myself buy until I've read this one, and also is only out in hardback at the moment, and I'm going to try and wait till it's out in paperback so I can have them match. Book number 3 is my first of 2 non-fictions on this list, and it's Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. Now I only first heard of Fern Brady when she was on Taskmaster earlier this year, late last year, whenever she was on Taskmaster, and I thought she was brilliant, and then I found out she's autistic and I was like, hello, I'm more interested now. I mean, the back literally says, a summary of my book. 1, I'm diagnosed with autism 20 years after telling a doctor I had it. 2, my terrible Catholic childhood. 3, my friendship with an elderly man who runs the corner shop and is definitely not trying to groom me. 4 homelessness, 5 stripping, 6 more stripping but with more nervous breakdowns, 7 I hate everyone at Edinburgh Uni, etc. 8 redacted as too spicy. 9 after everyone tells me I don't look autistic, I try to cure my autism and get addicted to Xanax. 10 redacted as too embarrassing. That's the kind of vibes I need. I mean, Alex Horne has said this book has the potential to truly change the way people think about people, and I think I need some of that in my life. And I got it £3 off. This is why I keep the stickers on, because I'm cheap and I like being reminded of when I get deals. Speaking of when I got good deals, I got this book for £6 from the works, and it's Stranger Things Darkness on the Edge of Town by Adam Christopher. I've read the other Stranger Things canon book, which was called Suspicious Minds, and it was absolutely brilliant. It really added to the existing story of the Stranger Things universe and made me even more obsessed with it than I already am. And I believe this story is about Hopper before the show takes place, and I love Hopper as a character. I love him so much. So I've been meaning to read this ever since I read Suspicious Minds, and putting it on my TBR was the chance I needed to do that. I'm really looking forward to reading this one as well. Obviously I'm really looking forward to reading all of them, otherwise I wouldn't put them on my TBR. That just sounds silly. The next book is another romance book, because I am nothing if not predictable, but this one is technically historical, maybe even fantasy, but it's definitely gay, and it's Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. I first knew Lex Croucher's name as a YouTuber, so when she started writing books I was like, is this another YouTuber book thing? Because YouTube went through a phase where everyone was getting book deals for a while, but then I saw like traditional booktubers and bookstagrammers and book people on the internet talking about Lex Croucher's books without even knowing that she did YouTube, and I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I'll give this a chance. My SD card just filled up and I didn't want to make the mistake that I made earlier in Vlogmas where I delete things without being 100% sure that I'd already used the footage or I didn't need the footage. So I just properly transferred all the footage over to my laptop. We're safe and can continue vlogging with a brand new fully empty SD card. So I was somewhere through talking about Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. I can't exactly remember where I left off, but what I will say, and why I did pick this book up over Lex Croucher's other books, is that this one is kind of rooted in Arthurian legend, and I love Arthurian legend almost exclusively because I was obsessed with the BBC show Merlin. But this one's also blurred by Rainbow Rowell, who wrote potentially one of my favourite books of all time. So I've heard good things about this. I'm really looking forward to reading it. And I'm looking forward to taking the contemporary out of my romance and adding some historical in. And more gay. More gay is always good. The next book is one that my sibling gifted me for my birthday, and they weren't entirely sure I was going to like it, but it is one that was on my radar and I did want to read. For one, it's shockingly pink. For two, it's got incredible sprayed edges. And for three, it's got a beautiful cover. It's Girl Goddess Queen by B. Fitzgerald. This is another Persephone and Hades retelling. I've read quite a lot. The Scarlet St. Clair series has 7 books in it, or will have 7 books in it by next year, and I've read 4 of them so far. So I feel like I've read a lot of Hades and Persephone this year, but I'm excited to finish that series and leap into another one because I can totally see why they're such compelling characters to write about. Alongside Arthurian legend, I also love Greek mythology. Greek mythology is one of my first loves. I've always been fascinated by it, so reading Greek inspired stories is something that I will always enjoy doing. I've read quite a few this year. I'm really looking forward to reading this. Maybe we can go to Greece again and I can read it there. That would be fun. I'd just like to go on holiday at this point. On to book, we're up to book number 8 now, and the 8th book on my list is another one with fantastic sprayed edges, and it's Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I feel like I've heard a lot about Chloe Gong this year, and I recently found out she's only 24, which makes me feel inadequate about my own life being 27, but I've also heard she's an incredible writer, and I think this cover is just stunning. I love it. I've heard really good things about this. The premise sounds really interesting. It kind of harks back to the dystopian books that were really popular when I was a teenager, but I believe this is an adult story. Oh, it's an adult epic fantasy debut inspired by Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Now, I'm not big on Shakespeare, but I do like the sound of this and I'm very excited to read it. It was at this point in making my list that I realised a lot of the books that I'm choosing or I was choosing for my 24 in 2024 are ones that I bought in 2023, which felt a little bit like neglecting my original TBR, but we'll get to that. That's why the TBR jar came in. But this one is one that I saw in bookshops and Waterstones over and over and over again, and I resisted buying. But then during, was it independent bookshop week or day or something, I was in an independent bookshop in my hometown, not where I currently live, like where I grew up, and they had not only this book but a signed copy of Tom Hanks' The Making of Another Major Motion Picture. And to think that this book, or at least, please hold, this page of this book has been signed by Tom Hanks. It's really cool. Woody from Toy Story has signed my book. Yeah, so this is another book that I probably shouldn't have bought, but it's one that I have been thinking about for a long time and I'm really intrigued. Yeah, I generally like books about filmmaking as well because I have a media degree, so I kind of understand some of what the world entails. Then we have another one for the Greek list, and it's Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, which is Medusa's story. I don't think I've read a book where Medusa was the main character, so I'm really intrigued. I've heard Natalie Haynes is like the Greek retelling author. I've heard a lot of good things about Natalie Haynes, and this is one that my husband and I picked up on our mini moon after our wedding last year, and our wedding was so bookishly themed and we got a few book vouchers, so we were like, yeah, okay, we can spend them like right now. And I think this is one of the books we picked up, mostly because it's got beautiful sprayed edges. Like, that is just stunning. Oh, and it's been blurred by Madeline Miller, who wrote Circe, which is a Greek book that I read this year. The next book on my list is gonna make some of you judge me, and I know it's gonna make some of you judge me, and I'm trying not to think about it too hard because this author is controversial. It seems like most of BookTok absolutely hates her, and she's also really commercially successful. I've been told by numerous people that I really need to read it, and I think part of it is because those people think I will enjoy it, and part of it is because those people want to talk to me about it because they really enjoyed it. And it's Verity by Colleen Hoover. I'm really trying not to feel guilt about wanting to read Colleen Hoover because I don't want to feel guilt about anything I want to read, and I think I have enjoyed Colleen Hoover books before and that doesn't make me a bad person. This is one that I wasn't going to read because people seem to hate Colleen Hoover so much and that influenced me, but then I saw one person talking about it who isn't really part of the bookish community but was documenting their reading journey throughout this year, and then I read the summary of this book and I was like, oh, that actually sounds really good, and if it was any other author's name attached to it I would want to read it, no question. And then I spoke to a bookish friend who I spoke to about It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us, and they said please bring Verity to the top of your list because it's so good. I'm like, okay, this year is the year. I feel like this will be the make or break to whether I decide whether I actually like Colleen Hoover as an author. On to the 12th book on my list and putting us halfway through, and I've already been talking for way too long, so this one's going to be long. But the next book on my list is Guild by Raven Kennedy. This is a super popular series and I think a 5th book has just come out, so there's a real danger that I'm accidentally committing to a whole series here. But this is one that I've seen a lot of hype for on the internet and I've had people in real life tell me it's really good. I picked this up for just £3. There's a Waterstones maybe 40 minutes from me that has a whole basement level of sales. So this book is ever so slightly damaged, so it was in the sale section, but I absolutely destroy the spines on my books when I read them anyway, so I don't really have much of a problem with them being damaged, and it's only a little bit of wear and tear on the spine anyway. And this is another Greek retelling. It's the story of King Midas, who was a character in Circe when I read that, so I feel like I'm going to get more of an insight into a Greek character that I am already vaguely familiar with. Moving on to the second half of my list, we have another non-fiction, and it's The Subtle Art, no it's not, it's The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck by Sarah Knight. I did really enjoy some of the non-fiction books I read this year, so I wanted to put some non-fiction on my list for next year, and this one sounds like it might be my cup of tea, and it's quite short, and I like the idea that I can maybe get through some of these quite quickly because they're not too long. Next up is one of the books that I definitely got from my TBR jar picks for this list. It's one that I have read before because I remember reading it and I vaguely remember what it's about, and because I've absolutely damaged the spine. But it's one that I read when I was a teenager and I've decided to keep, and I'm not sure why. So I essentially want to read it to decide whether it's still worth keeping. But it's called 0.4 by Mike Lancaster. I got it for, again, I really have always kept the stickers on my books, because this one I got for $1.99 in my favourite discount bookstore. My name is Kyle Straker and I don't exist anymore, which is an intriguing a start as you can get. So begins the story of Kyle Straker, recorded on old audio tapes. I love mixed media novels, they're so much fun. You might think these tapes are a hoax, but perhaps they contain the history of a past world. If what the tapes say are true, it means that everything we think we know is a lie, and if everything is a lie, does that mean we are too? Plug into a gripping new generation of sci-fi. Sounds pretty fun. It's probably YA, if not middle grade. It's super short, and if I don't like it, it means I can unhaul it, and that's probably not a bad thing. Next one is also a pick from the TBR jar, except I never read it, and reading the back, I'm not sure why I ever picked it up or why I kept it, but it's on my shelf. So this is another one that it's like, okay, if I don't like it, I'll unhaul it, and that's fine. It's called The Worst of Me by Kate Levan. It seems to be a teenage angsty romance, but it's also relatively short. So, and I bet the font is quite big. Yeah, the font's quite big. The margins are huge. Is it even 200 pages? No. Might even put this one on my January list. The next book is the opposite of short, but it is an author that I really should have read by now, considering I've been in the bookish space on the internet for several years and I haven't read a Sarah J Maas book. Is a lot. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. It's called House of Earth and Blood. There is a second book that's already out, and I believe the third book is coming out. This is one of the longest books I own. I made a TikTok of the 5 longest books in my collection, and I believe this came in at number 5. It's around 800 pages. It's an absolute brick, and honestly, I might consider investing in a copy on my Kindle, because reading this physically just feels like a kind of workout I don't need when I'm trying to read in bed. But I've heard incredible things about Sarah J Maas. I've heard incredible things about this story. Definitely got to find a special occasion to read this, because whatever month I decide to read this in, there's a real chance I will not read anything else. What are we on? On to number 17. A little bit of YA, because I've seen lots of hype about it and I want to understand the hype. One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I also think this cover design is stunning. I love these kinds of books that I'm hoping it's going to be like a found family vibe, but it's 4 people that never would have been friends in a normal world, and then something happens to bring them together. 5 students walk into detention, only 4 students leave. Murder mystery. I'm hoping this will be really engaging and I can read it relatively quickly. Yeah, reading things quickly is just the goal here. Next up, The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I'm sorry for butchering that surname. This book is super popular. I think I picked this up in a charity shop, yep, for £1 whole, so it's a little bit battered, but like I say, I tend to batter my books anyway, so I kind of like having secondhand books because I'm not the first person to batter them. It sounds really interesting, but it also sounds a little bit thrillery and mental healthy, so it might get in my head a little bit, but I am looking forward to reading this. And this does really diversify my genres, because there is a lot of romance here, and this is nothing like anything else I've got on this list, I don't think. Into the last 6. Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I think this is a standalone book, but it fits within the Heartstopper universe. I have a whole box set of Alice Oseman books that I haven't got around to, so I'm hoping that if I can read this year, it will kickstart me actually reading those. And I love Alice Oseman's writing style and all the representation she has in her books, so again, I imagine this is one that I'm going to really enjoy. Next up is another one that came from the TBR jar, and that's The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult. I have actually attempted to read this one before, but it's, I think, quite adult fiction-y in its genre, and that's not something I tend to read, so I found it difficult to engage with, so I put it down with the intent to pick it up at a different time. So hopefully I'll find this more engaging this time. On to The Last 4. This is another new release that I probably shouldn't be prioritising over my old TBR. This one's definitely doing the rounds on social media, and I want to understand the hype, and that's Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I believe this was indie published originally and has now been traditionally published. I picked this up in the works for just £5. love a deal. I think the cover design is stunning, and I think this is another fantasy book. I've heard incredible things about this, and I also follow the author on TikTok, and she seems like a lot of fun, so I really want to read this. Last three, except this one I don't have a physical copy of, but I do have it on Audible, so it doesn't really help my physical TBR, but it will in the long run. The next book I want to read is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and essentially the reason I want to read it is because when I went to the Waterstones near me that has the basement with the sale section, I picked up this novella which is called The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss for only £3. Again, quite damaged, but again, not an issue. But it was only when I picked the title out of my TBR jar I realised that this is a sequel novella that comes after two main books in a series, which is currently unfinished and has been waiting for the third instalment, the next instalment, however you want to describe it, for over a decade, I believe. The more I look into it, the more I find some loving resentment within the community that really love this book. To be able to read this novella, I want to read. I did quite an extensive research, and you can't really read this without reading the others, so I got The Name of the Wind and whatever the sequel's called on Audible with some of my Audible credits. They're both really long books. I think they're both over 20 hours, but I want to listen to those next year so that I can read this. Okay, last two, we're nearly there. The next book I want to read is another one that I bought last year, but I've heard incredible things. There is a sequel that I have already bought, so I also want to read that, and that is 16 Souls by Rosie Talbot. TikTok Zone. This is a YA spooky, gothic, ghosty book that has loads of representation and inclusion. I love Rosie's TikTok, and I'm intrigued to see how her presentation of herself online translates into her writing style, and I also think this cover is absolutely stunning. I've been talking for so long that my camera just stopped recording. The last book on my list is ironically one that is also in the wedding library, so I could choose it as a book club pick, but I haven't. And it's a classic, but it's a classic fantasy, so it's more appealing to me than the traditional classics that I have absolutely no interest in. And that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Apparently I have a copy that looks like it's really old. Let's have a look when this was published, because I have a feeling this might have been my nan's. So this might be from the 80s. That's probably why I kept this copy, but I do have a newer copy downstairs which I might read instead of this because this feels a bit fragile. But The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have seen all the Lord of the Rings films, I've seen all the Hobbit films. I feel like I radiate someone who should have read Lord of the Rings and should love Lord of the Rings. And I do like Lord of the Rings, but I just haven't read this. And I'm going to amend that this year. It doesn't feel too chonky, but I know that Tolkien has quite literary writing style, and I sometimes find that really difficult to comprehend. So this one might actually be one that I pick up on Audible, because I feel like that might be more helpful to aid my comprehension of it. This isn't Lord of the Rings. I don't own Lord of the Rings, but I think this is a gateway drug that will lead to Lord of the Rings. Those are the 24 books that I hope to read in 2024. But the advantage and the thing that I really like about there being 24 of them is that 24 is a multiple of 12. So my plan is that I'm going to read 2 a month. That feels very achievable, especially now that I've started making monthly TBRs. I can just pick 2 of these a month to put on my TBR. Though the thing with my monthly TBR is that currently I have slots, for want of categories, for 10 books. And I very, very rarely read 10 books in a month. So the likelihood that I will get to all of these in that regard is little to none, but I would really like to prioritise these. But I also want to prioritise everything, which consequently means I'm prioritising nothing. This video is going to be so long, and thank you so much if you stayed to the end. I hope what I've said has been engaging in any way, shape or form, because I feel like I've just repeated how excited I am to read these books over and over and over again. The hardback stack is smaller, but still mighty. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you've made it to this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear about any books that you'd love to prioritise in the next calendar year of your reading. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another Vlogmas video. Bye!